The western Hoolock gibbon is the only ape species in Bangladesh, and they have been by far the most devastated of all the gibbon species as a direct result of the destruction of their forest habitat. Primate census studies that were conducted in the 1970s indicated that this monogamous and territorial gibbon species numbered in the several thousands throughout all of Bangladesh in their forested regions. However, the vast majority of the country's forests have been recently cut down at an alarming rate for the timber, to make room for farmlands, rice paddies, oil palm plantations, tea and rubber plantations, and for human housing. Today, the wild Hoolock Gibbons of Bangladesh are not a stable, viable population, and it has been projected that there are now less than 300 still alive, with that number dwindling fast as their forested habitat is relentlessly being destroyed. This amazing ape species is now on the brink of extinction in Bangladesh, and the entire remaining population may well collapse completely in just a few short years if nothing is done to save them now. Hello, I'm Dr. Elliot Hamioff. When I first started my academic career studying gibbons and their behavior back in the kinder, gentler days of 1975, I used a brand new prototype of an invention called a portable field video camera that in fact required 2 people to operate and used manually threaded reel-to-reel videotape spools. Who would have thought at that time that I would now be called a pioneer in gibbon studies by doing that? Perhaps the use of video in this program of the Hoolock Gibbons of Bangladesh could potentially be used to generate some public awareness as to their plight and possibly to help build a consensus with politicians and government officials to conserve and protect the remaining few gibbons that are still alive there. The hope is to help bring them back from the brink of extinction if, of course, it's not too late.
We have 10 species of primates in the country. Hoolock gibbon is the only ape in the country. They are frugivores, so they need fruit-bearing trees, they need tall trees, and they are confined to the northeast and southeast in the country.
We have developed our studies in particular to try and quantify their role as seed dispersers. So gibbons are intensive farmers. The seeds they germinate are in the 30, 40 hectares of forest in which they live, where they have a great chance of germinating. And so they're intensive farmers of the forest, important agents in the natural regeneration of forests.
Over the past 50 years, well over half of the world's tropical forests have been destroyed. Forested land is still being cut, decimated, or burned at a rate of over a full football field every second of every day. In Bangladesh, many vertebrate animal species have already gone extinct. As a direct result of this wholesale destruction of their forests in the name of commerce and development, most scientists agree that within the next 10 to 20 years, if the rate of deforestation in Bangladesh continues unabated and unchecked, hundreds or even thousands of the other plant and animal species currently found there will simply disappear, to be wiped out, and it seems that the Hoolock gibbons are next in line.
When I was born, half of this country was kind of forested, but there were forests between villages, between homes. Like in my own birthplace, every village had so much of forest land, so much of forest that tiger could live there. But now I don't think we have even more than 3% of the land of the country which is forested. And all these forests are mostly on the fringe of the country, at the borders.
We had all over in the northeast and southeast, we had bear, we had leopards, we had elephants. Now we don't have leopards almost anywhere. We have very few bears living. We had freshwater crocodile, we had ghorials. Now the freshwater crocodile went extinct. Now the ghorials are at the verge of extinction. So we don't have much forest left in the country. So in the whole country, rest of the country, we have the remaining 2 to 3% of the forest.
If you look into our population dynamics, maybe say 50 years back, the population was only 40 million. Right now it is 160 million. So from 40 million, 160 million, which is a 4-time increase, and it's increasing very fast. On the first victim of this is the forest. Forests are being cut down, converted into agricultural land because we need to produce more food.
We got a country with almost nothing. We had a land, we had to grow crops, we had to grow many things, and the people who had homestead forests around, they had to cut down the forest, they had to convert that forest to croplands, so they had to depend for other things, for the timber, for the firewood, primarily on the forests, government-owned forests.
With the problems, the plight of the people of Bangladesh, the Hoolock gibbon is threatened there. The forest is going too rapidly, it's not being managed sustainably. And of course, droughts are occurring that are giving rise to forest fires. Large areas of forest have been burnt down and the habitat lost and animals burned.
So there are some government-sponsored official logging, but in the name of that logging, a lot of additional logging is done. Is there illegal logging in the country? Of course, yes. In the hill tracts, the patches of forest or the rich, old forest have been cut down for timber. Maybe only a small portion is legally done. Tragedy is that these are done by powerful people, politically powerful, socially powerful people.
Actually, ours is a small country, but the population is too high. So this is a problem. There are a lot of problems that will crop up. We are also facing problem with the forest resources. We are facing problem with the wildlife, but still we are trying to conserve our native animals.
They've got the laws, but they're not being enforced, and the forest is being wiped out, and it's escalated by the El Nino effect, the droughts, the fires, that are just making things horrific. This horrific over-exploitation of the forest. And over-exploitation that is not in human interest. It is impairing the quality of human life. It's so senseless.
Our forest degraded and destroyed, I think mainly because we, people, remained unaware of the value of the forest. The government also didn't do anything strongly to protect the forest.
You need 50% of these countries, monsoon countries, forested. It goes below that and the flooding and the soil erosion problems escalate. And we knew that 30 years ago. It takes 100 years at least for some sort of reasonable forest to grow. But governments only last for 5 years, and so they've got to have a quick fix it. Their attitude was these top governor people got rich in the last 20 years, now it's our turn.
Even though recent conservation laws have been enacted, and there have been some efforts put in place to identify some of the remaining forest patches as fully protected national parks, the problems still remain. The measures and laws are being ignored, and illegal logging still continues unabated. due to either government and corporate corruption or a lack of resources and manpower to actually protect the forests, or a combination of them.
Though we call these little forests as national parks, we don't have really enough guards to really protect it. Besides the corruption in the government departments, which is common in Bangladesh, even we don't have enough resources to protect it, even if our officials were not corrupt.
Firstly, we need trained manpower to handle wildlife. We are facing shortage of manpower. We require more rangers, more trained professional manpowers.
Having enough people to patrol the areas, to protect them, is something there has not been enough investment in. And that's where the investment is really needed in such conservation activities and various projects.
There are few officers and few guards trying to protect a big area we call national park, and that gives the opportunity to people to enter and do the logging, or more often it's the scavengers who take away little branch, little saplings. We don't have enough resources to protect it, first thing.
The illegal logging companies are eroding into the national park still, and there's not enough manpower, there's not enough determination to stop it. And there were suspicions that the logging companies were making it worth the while of the forestry officials were turning a blind eye. And so, you know, what can you do if they're not being paid enough to do their job? They won't do it properly.
Never before in the history of Bangladesh as an independent nation founded in 1971 has anyone witnessed such wholesale destruction of species and ecosystems in the country. Global economic upheavals, rampant government corruption, corporate greed, and struggling efforts by the Bangladesh government to become a more self-sustaining developing country have all contributed to placing the forests and its plant and animal inhabitants in dire peril.
Of course, the main energy should be protecting natural habitat. And that's what we've been trying to do for 30 years. But individuals, organisations cannot dictate to governments how they manage their resources. And until these governments will understand and act appropriately, you know, there's no hope. No amount of money seems to be able to stop illegal logging, to enforce sustainable management of the forest.
So in real shape, in real sense, forests are in highly degraded shape. Now if you complain against a new industrial unit coming up, immediately there will be hue and cry, because whom are you trying to protect? The monkeys in those forests, or at the cost of people who would be getting job if the factory is open? So this is a big challenge for us.
The forests are no longer seen as a wonderful source of biodiversity and as a national heritage and a national treasure to be protected with pride and patriotism, but instead are now seen as a cheap source of money and profits by government officials and corporations. The most recent efforts to destroy the remaining forested regions of Bangladesh has been the pursuit of producing oil from genetically cloned palm trees in places where lush tropical forests once stood.
The demand for palm oil is insatiable, and the government has been using this as an excuse to cut down forest, and they cut down forest in places that are totally unsuitable for growing oil palm. But they've got the timber. They won't understand that their most valuable resource in the long term is sustainably managed rainforest. That will yield far more economically than any monoculture, any short-term gain you get from cutting the forest down.
So it was not perhaps a good planning, and it's because of international demand, of course. So, for quick return, we have been trying to, lose our or destroy our natural forests. And you look at our northeast and the southeast, we really destroyed our humid tropical forests only, to plant this rubber, to plant these palm trees, but it didn't really help us anyway.
I mean, it is grim, it is desperate, and there have been forecasts by 2020 the forest will be virtually gone if the current trend of activities continues.
I'm a bit, shall I say, disturbed by finding there's a new move to go for more oil palm plantation. Some of our workers, the laborers who had been working in Malaysia, they have come back with seed. And some of them are now pushing for oil palm plantation as a source of income.
The oil palm plantations, it's sick because they're not providing local work for local people. They're bringing in their own people from outside, and the local people are worse off with their forests gone and with no jobs. So that is really sad and really irresponsible. And I suppose it comes down to the government shouldn't be allowing so much activity from outside. They should be looking after their people better.
Even if we get some return from there, from palm plantation or rubber plantation, the return doesn't go to the locals, who really own the forest, who really live around the forest. It goes to somewhere else, and we buy something else out of that money, So really, it doesn't help our Hoolocks, or it doesn't help the local people.
In addition to the uncounted thousands of gibbons that had been killed as a direct result of the destruction of their habitat for timber, or to make way for tea, rubber, and oil palm plantations, poverty-stricken indigenous hill tribe people still hunt gibbons for food, and criminal poachers still hunt and collect gibbons for the pet trade.
In fact, this is difficult for the people to catch the gibbon. Only few tribe people. Now, in other parts, some of the people, to fulfill their meat supply, they depends on the wild animal. In fact, and so in that way, they also sometimes hunt the gibbon only for meat.
Normally, the native people do look after their forest quite well, but there's a big demand for gibbons and macaques for food and also for medicinal purposes, for primate balm. You get the gibbon or the macaque bones and you boil them down to a paste and you use this as a tonic. It's a tonic for men, it's a tonic for pregnant women, and this is still huge business.
The Hoolock Gibbons in Bangladesh used to be found throughout the entire country in all kinds of forested regions. However, as a result of the destruction of their habitats, they are only found in patches of badly fragmented forests in the northeast and southeast of the country. One such forest patch that is the last one to contain a healthy, viable gibbon population is called the Lawachara National Park. The status of Hoolocks there, in this last bastion, however, can hardly be considered a stable and tenable position for this species.
For gibbon, I found Lawachara is the best one in this country to study gibbon for long term. And this is a good forest, and in British India, this is one of the best forests in this country. You will find more than 160 species of trees here. So this is one of the diverse, floral diversity is high in this forest. At the same time, the faunal diversity is also high. You can get the bigger animals like that, the primates, and the most fantastic one is the lesser of Hoolock gibbon is here. And at the same time, you can get some other primates like Cape langur, rhesus macaque, pigtail macaque, and slow loris as well.
I came to this forest first time in 1980. I saw many Hoolock in this forest, and in other forests like in Chunoti, I found large number of Hoolocks there, where no Hoolock exists now. In Lawachara, in this forest, I could walk on this walkway in 1980s and see several school of Hoolock calling almost the whole day. I once even saw the Hoolock, two groups of Hoolock came together and they were threatening each other. Now it's not possible to see Hoolock so easily because they are so few, and hiding somewhere you have to look for them.
The trend line has divided the forest into two parts. The road has divided the forest, again the fragmentation. There is a telephone and electricity that has been caused damage to the forest as well. At the same time, this is a small area and surrounded by tea gardens mostly, and the local people depends, especially the fuel wood, on these things. And once it was the supply of fuel wood to the neighboring areas as well. So habitat shrinkage is the main cause of forest destruction and collection of fuel wood in once as well.
Forestry officials are now trying a little harder to incorporate the help of the local villagers, their manpower, and their resources to try and conserve what's left of the forest at Lawachara, and to educate the local villagers on the patriotic importance to preserve their natural resources.
We have already started co-management in the Lawachara areas. First of all, we have to conserve the existing forest resources there. And Hoolock gibbon is particularly an arboreal animal. We need to save at any cost the tall trees, the existing tall trees there. So we have to take all our effort to conserve those trees. Forestry people alone cannot do that. We are now collaborating surrounding people to conserve the forest with the forest department people. That's our ultimate goal. We should conserve the forests of the Lawachara.
There are heroic, noble, and valiant efforts currently being conducted by some conservation groups, most notably the Wildlife Trust of Bangladesh, trying to make every effort to help save and protect these gibbons, as well as wildlife in general.
First of all, we wanted to have a stock taking of our wildlife and the wilderness area. We wanted to have a database for that, and we wanted to identify the threatened species in the country, and we wanted to protect all the threatened species by doing researches, by doing some applied activities, and then we want to save the wilderness, that is the habitats of the wildlife also.
But realistically, these conservation groups are fighting a losing battle, with dozens and dozens of people still coming into the fully protected national parks and brazenly cutting down the trees that house these gibbons, even doing so in front of TV film crews while they were in the forest filming the gibbons.
Like many developing countries, Bangladesh has a big problem of having corrupt practices in the government and even outside the government. In the field of business also, the corruption is rampant. So this is the picture that this lot of corrupt practices is in the society, in the government. We need to stop that first, like in some way, or reduce it as fast as we can. Or we cannot protect anything, almost nothing can be protected with corrupt officials.
We should not clear fell any of the forest patches. Rather, we can go for, if needed, we can go for selection felling. But the remaining forests what we have in Bangladesh, now I think that should go under protected forests, protected areas. We should not do any kind of management practices there, but the remaining natural forests should be conserved as protected areas.
Even though there are some exceptional actions being taken by a few individual foresters and certain forestry officials, the main government of Bangladesh has been either unable or unwilling to stop the logging in forested regions containing gibbons. At first glance, it would seem that the people of Bangladesh as a whole do not see their Hoolock gibbons as a part of their national treasure, or as a national heritage, or as a source of national pride to be protected with a sense of patriotism, and that they collectively do not care at all if these animals went extinct or not, as so many other animal species in Bangladesh have gone. But perhaps the people of Bangladesh have no idea of the situation facing their Hoolock gibbons, and that perhaps they may well be able to identify with the plight of the Hoolock gibbons if they became aware of the situation.
I think the main weakness in our society is awareness. Like majority of our people do not see the value of the forest as a natural endowment. So to protect the forest, we must first do that. That's first, second, and third, that we must tell the large part of the society that this is our national heritage and we must protect it. And we have so little of it. We must make people aware of the value of these forests so that people create enough pressure on the government to do more than what they are doing right now.
For conservation of wildlife in the country, the last tool we have in hand is awareness. We have to make our people aware. We have to tell them that out of 1,600 vertebrate species of this country, more than 50% are in peril. More than 50% are at the verge of extinction. So we have to make them aware that unless we do something now, today, nothing is going to survive around you.
We hope we are in a position to stop further degradation in the selected patches. So that's the approach that we take. Still the threat is there because people want to come in, and therefore we are advocating this approach of participatory planning or participatory approach that involve the people living in and around the area in management of the forest. And that is only possible when the people see there is a tangible income coming to them resulting from the protection.
These collaborative efforts are starting to bring in international assistance from groups and organizations that aim to help in the conservation efforts by the Bangladeshis by working shoulder to shoulder with concerned government officials.
In Bangladesh, a lot of good work has been done by the non-government organization we call NGO. These are the voluntary organization or employing people who want to do good work in the society.
We encourage all kinds of voluntary activities like Wildlife Trust Board. They are coming forward for doing research there. We encourage them. At this time, at this moment, we encourage all kinds of voluntary activities by anybody to conserve the forest.
Investment in the conservation of these Hoolock gibbons can take many forms. One of them is the research conducted on captive Hoolock gibbons to better maintain and breed them, in the ultimate hopes of translocating some captive gibbons back to the wild if and when forests can be protected.
With the work we're doing here at the Gibbon Conservation Center, we're hoping to be able to complement the work that's being done in the wild with what we're seeing close up. We've been seeing a lot of behaviors that have never been reported before, and it's great for us to have the opportunity to be able to see these firsthand and allow the researchers to understand what they could be looking for. Eventually, gibbons that are brought into zoos could possibly be released back into the wild. There is possible hope of releasing gibbons into the wild in either Bangladesh or northeast India, but again, you need protected areas. So if you're going to be putting gibbons into other localities, you're going to need more rangers to protect those areas. You need to patrol them daily. You need to educate the people who live nearby, give them incentives to leave the forest alone.
Another important investment to be made in the ultimate conservation of these Hoolock gibbons is by multinational corporations conducting business in Bangladesh, understanding the need to live in peaceful coexistence with nature and wildlife, even if it reduces their profit margins. The goodwill built up by their actions would no doubt more than balance out their profit margin sheets.
We can't destroy all the wild places and become so-called developed, because we miss the necessary part of this earth that sustains life. We can't continue doing that. So I think we are becoming more aware, and definitely wildlife and human beings can coexist and must coexist, or we all probably will perish soon.
In a country like ours, it's a poverty-stricken country. So you have to think the needs of the people. You have to give them options. It is very difficult to have a coexistence, but I still believe that if the politicians, if the social leaders, if the conservationists come forward, we can still share our land with our wildlife for a better coexistence.
The perfect example was when the Bangladesh government partnered up with the Chevron Corporation and gave them the task of conducting a 3D seismic survey at sites in and around the Lawachara National Park in the efforts to expand the drilling for gas that has been going on out there for several years in order to understand just how large the gas field is and what level of expansion would be required.
Chevron have been operating in Bangladesh for many years. We currently provide over 40% of the country's energy needs, and we are working hard to be able to not only sustain that, but increase production for future needs.
We need gas, we need oil, but it should be done in a way that it is environmentally responsive. That has led to IUCN's a program called Business and Biodiversity. Any industrial unit who are willing to work with us, we are willing to guide them. We are willing to assist them, not to cover up their act, but to help them to do the thing in a green way.
In 1997, negligent drilling conducted at Lawachara by another energy company caused a major blowout, resulting in a catastrophic gas explosion. That had a significant negative impact on the forest surroundings and wildlife. This made the local villagers and conservation groups very frustrated, angry, and distrustful about any new testing and new drilling by any other energy corporation.
Lawa Chora is one small little place where Hoolock gibbon lives, and this place has been disturbed by the oil and gas exploration, gas pipeline, gas explosion several times before. And now again, if another company, any company comes and tries to do seismic research here, people become angry and become sensitive and become wary of this repeated exploration, oil pipeline laying and digging, and then finally one day explosion.
I'm convinced that we need gas, we need oil, because without oil, without gas, we cannot survive even one day. The situation has become such. So the people who will be involved in these activities, they must make sure, they must assure us that nothing will happen in the ecosystem. They must make our people aware that nothing is going to happen to the ecosystem, to them, to their wildlife, to their culture, to their natural heritage. So that assurance has to be there.
Before we started any work in the forest, we conducted an environmental impact assessment. The results of this assessment went to a third-party, reputable international agency, IUCN, and based on their evaluation of the recommendations of that, we built in certain plans into an environmental management plan. This included IUCN personnel being present at all times to monitor our teams to make sure that wildlife were not disturbed.
We agreed, provided we are given the neutrality, we can maintain neutrality and our independence. So Chevron agreed, government agreed, and let me report to you, when they were doing this work, the junior people would inform if they see anything unusual or anything they feel that would disturb the whole ecosystem. And immediately we recommended to Chevron that shift this station. We found that Chevron possibly shifted 40, 50, maybe 60% of their stations based on our advice.
No vehicles were taken into the forests. Work teams were very small groups of people so as to minimize the disruption on the wildlife. No trees were cut during any of the time. We only worked on existing trails, and the decibel levels of the sound that our agencies made were less than the background noise of the birds and the insects in the forest.
We suggested that in selecting the alignment of the seismic survey, the monitoring grid and carrying the cables and others, they should try to avoid even the bushes and shrubs, because we do not know what sort of animal is there. While they are doing the hole, they should be careful about the burrow animals, similarly flora and fauna.
I genuinely believe the way we've worked on this survey, we've done it in harmony and close consideration with the environment. I'm delighted to see that the 12 gibbon families that the independent monitoring survey found have since increased to 13 since we've been back after we've done the work. We've demonstrated we're capable of working in harmony and cooperation with the communities, the environment, the species, for the good of Bangladesh, preserving the nature and the ecology of the forest, and the Hoolock gibbons are still there, and I'm delighted at the way all that has worked.
After the whole work was over, maybe it was after 3 months, I sent my people again that do an post-project evaluation. And we couldn't find any change or any difference. And our experts told me that they felt that the nature is back and there's not been any impact on biodiversity. So I believe this was possible because Chevron was very careful. Our people were also very strict.
The Hoolock gibbons in Bangladesh are on the brink of extinction, but perhaps it is still not too late. especially if the people of Bangladesh understand the national heritage and treasure that they've got in their hands. If conservation groups can maintain their efforts educating the local villagers, and if corporations and NGOs can join forces with government ministries to make continued efforts, then the tide may well turn away from the Hoolock Gibbons' fate of being destroyed in Bangladesh and being simply added onto the list of other extinct species there. There still might be a window of opportunity to save the remnants of the species in Bangladesh.
It's not as popular as getting rich quick, as getting the palm oil, getting the timber, getting the coal and everything. That's so popular worldwide to get these resources, even if it's unsustainable. But increasingly, I think pressures from NGOs in the countries concerned, the local people are rebelling against the destruction of their environment. I've seen this in Bangladesh, I've seen it in parts of Indonesia, supporting movements to promote the sustainable management of rainforests and to stop illegal activities, to protect the parks that have been established.
It's very important for the people and scientists in Northeast India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and China to understand that they are the only countries that have Hoolock gibbons. It's a very unique species. It's very little known about them. From the work that we've done here, we've realized that this is the most intelligent of the gibbon species, and the least amount studied on is the Hoolock gibbon. And I just hope that those countries understand the rarity and the honor to have that species in their country.
On a practical note, real conservation would almost require that NGOs and big multinational corporations should pick up the slack by sponsoring the hiring and equipping of Bangladeshi wardens and rangers, and giving steady long-term jobs to hundreds of local villagers to patrol the forests in a high-visibility manner, in addition to setting up boundary markers, as well as getting special prosecutors to more strictly enforce the laws that are already in place but are not at all enforced.
I actually found very, very strong relationship between the location of a ranger station and the gibbons. If there's a ranger station there, then gibbon density is high within 5 kilometres of that ranger station. Moving out from there, it then starts to drop. So it actually shows good forest protection does work.
I'm a Muslim, and my religion says that God has not created anything unnecessarily. So everything has a role. All life forms have a role in the ecosystem, and all life form has a role in human society and in the ecosystem. So we need to protect all life forms for our betterment. So if we don't show respect to other life forms, we are not going to show respect to ourselves. I'm a pious man. If I follow my religion, I'm supposed to conserve our biodiversity and the wildlife.
We have always lived with wildlife, and only in the modern society we have found that wildlife and human interest are in conflict. I think it is only the human greed or our desire to do too much for ourselves or too fast, develop too fast, that we want to take up all the land used by the wildlife. This is, I think, a big mistake that we made in the 19th and 20th century. But this century, we are going to see some differences, I hope, because this cannot go on.
Within a few short years, if nothing is done, literally all of the viable tropical forests in Bangladesh will be gone, replaced by vast fields of dead weeds and empty, barren, parched, and windswept wasteland. And at that point, there will be no turning back from this hellish abyss that awaits the future generations of Bangladeshis. But perhaps, if some of the corporations and NGOs and conservation agencies could identify with and save their remaining high visibility species, like the Hoolock gibbons, then some of their habitats could also be saved. It is as if possibly the largest dominoes could be prevented from falling over, then the myriad of smaller dominoes behind them may be spared as well.
I would say that the conservation and preservation of species, particularly the Hoolock gibbons here in Bangladesh, is way up there towards the top of our agenda. So what we have been doing in the Sylhet region is a tree plantation program. Over the last few years, we've planted about 120,000 saplings in and around the area, a large amount of which have been in the forest, most of them being fruits, and we're hoping that this initiative, as these trees grow, can provide a source of nutrient for the species, particularly the Hoolock gibbons.
I'm sure if you can convince our people can get together. They fought for liberation together. Every time we have a crisis in the country, we fight together. And if our politicians, if our conservationists, if our social scientists could tell them that we have to fight to conserve our wildlife, wilderness, and the habitats, and the forests, and the wetlands, I'm sure that we'll be able to conserve our land, we'll be able to conserve our forests, we'll be conserve our wildlife, including the Hoolock gibbons.
Otherwise, it will be too late, which it may already be, and the extinction of these close relatives of ours from the forests of Bangladesh will be a true tragedy, and its people will have to bear the scar of allowing a part of their national treasure and a source of their national pride to slip away into the void of extinction. Especially saddening after the Bangladesh people, as a united whole, fought so hard to gain independence with their desire to control their country's resources by themselves and for themselves. The fate of the Hoolock gibbons in Bangladesh is entirely in the hands of that government to do with as they please, and they will be remembered in history as either those people who acknowledged their national treasure and national heritage as true patriots and made the efforts to protect them for future generations to appreciate, or to be remembered as those people who cut down their trees and killed off their wildlife and destroyed their national resources without any sense of remorse or responsibility. Only time and history will tell whether the Hoolock gibbons of Bangladesh of the future will continue to be studied by biologists and zoologists in the wild and national parks, or whether only their bones and remnants will be left over to be studied by paleontologists trying to reconstruct the profile of an extinct species in Bangladesh. So, I will leave history to the historians. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for staying.
Yeah. মজা ঝুলঝুল উল্লুক উল্লুক ভীষণ ভীষণ পালক থেকে ভীষণ ভীষণ গাছ থেকে গাছে লাফিয়ে চলে যায় গাছ থেকে গাছে লাফিয়ে চলে যায় ডাকে হো 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 ডাকে হো হো হো